go ahead and get started. Thank you. I would like to call this meeting to order, and we will start with approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
A second, but then I have a question. Under budget discussion, it lists Mr. Covington and Dr. Houlihan. We are also going to discuss the budget after that. Okay, just want to clarify. Yes, very good. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you. We will move into the budget discussion. 2018-19 Superintendent's proposed draft.
So thank you, Ms. Merrill. So to go back to Ms. Heintel's question, I just have some brief talking points because I'd rather turn it over to the full board for discussion, questions, comments. What you have in your packet today is a copy of the presentation from the April board meeting. You have a copy of the supplemental documents that the board received in the board packet in April as well. And you also have a copy of the capital budget, both year one and the 5-year capital budget proposal. I've also given you a copy of our social and emotional learning plan and a memorandum regarding questions I've had about the positions that have been requested and where they should be housed. So I just want to say that there has not been any substantial changes in the budget proposal since the April board meeting. I know that, and if Ms. Heintel wants to speak to any changes from the capital end, from the operating end, there have been no changes to the budget as proposed or the recommendation. This budget still continues to call for major investments in school safety and security, investing in our employees, and our idea of continuous improvement. Those continue to be the 3 big buckets. I'm a superintendent. I'm proud of our team and proud of this budget. I think it identifies a significant amount of gaps we have in our system, and if we can fill those gaps, we will be in a much better position this time next year than we are today. The major, I guess, hallmark piece of this budget request is around social and emotional learning. This is something that we continue to hear from every stakeholder as a need. I hear it almost daily from our teachers, our parents, our principals, and even our students who have said that this is something that they really support and they need in terms of investing in social workers, counselors, mental health therapists, and also training of teachers. So again, there have been no fundamental changes as proposed. Mr. Covington and I are happy to take questions or have other discussion, but the budget stands as was recommended in the April board meeting.
And I believe the CIP went out, Donna sent it out on Friday with the package with the agenda. So everyone should have that as well. We got it twice? There's one that's the 5-year plan and there's one that's just 19. One is just 19 and the other is 5 years. I just thought it would be easier to just look at the 19 one instead of. If we just get the one that's just the 3 pages, a copy for everyone, that would be great. If we just did the 1-year plan, that would be awesome. No, then there's one that has the 5 years. That's just 19. Yeah. I know, but it's just 19. So if you go to the other one she sent, that's the 5 years.
They're formatted the same exact way.
Oh, I was looking for it.
Yeah, sorry. And then you can also sort it by school if you'd like. Okay. You go over to the.
Okay, that's interesting.
So we're certainly open to having discussion or questions related to the budget as recommended.
Okay, so board,
depending on how you want to do this, do you just want to start with your questions using what we received back in April, or do you want to start with from the beginning and just go page by page?
I'd be happy to walk people through the CIP.
You want to start with the
Or we can
CIP?
start with the budget and then do CIP.
Yeah, let's start with the budget.
I have one comment. I have one comment that I would like to say first. My discussion that I want to talk about is not about the total amount of the money that we get from the county. I understand that is set in stone, 44.51 cents. I talked with Ms. Hintel about it today. I mean, and I defend that to the fullest. How it's broken down is what I'm still confused about. I want to know, where is the 9 million less the administration fee of the lift money? And, you know, last year, we had to give up 3.1 million, and most of it came out of CIP. And I fully expected to see that back this year, in addition to what we normally would get. And I just don't, I mean, I run into people every day. They just have questions and questions and questions. And with our numbers basically staying level on students, and we're wanting 7 million more, and we've got a $9 million grant, I can't tell them what's going on.
Well, your 9 million grant is completely separate from this budget because this is all part of the local budget. So the 9 million would never be included in this per year.
But we benefit from it.
We do benefit from it, but those are new initiatives, new strategies, and new services that are funded through that grant application. We can't include that in our current
But do
local
any
budget
of them
proposal.
come before the board?
Excuse me?
Do any of that grant, those new actions, do they come before the board?
They would if they have a contract in place or a dollar amount that needs to be put in. Of course, the board would still have to approve those items.
Well,
I guess the question is what's the $9 million being used for? Because that's a lot of money
Thank you.
that's being used, which is great, but just to have another update on maybe what's going on.
So I know when the grant was presented to the board a year ago, or when we received it, and it's 27 million over 3 years. We were told, we were given a list of services that would be funded each year through that grant. Do you have an updated list of those services that have been filled or not filled, and what is the status of the grant money, and what schools has it been applied to? Are there any schools that was on the list that it hasn't been applied to? If we could just have an update
Just as a summary,
and a list of services.
I can tell you today, we do not have with us a list of services that have been completed or not completed to date. That is something that Dr. Jones would have to compile probably. The grant, as a reminder, is 9 million times 3 years, so 27 million dedicated only to 13 schools. And those 13 schools are in your Title I feeder patterns, the Forest Hills clusters and the Monroe cluster. And they fund everything from training to rewards and incentives and stipends to new positions. One of the new positions is called a master teacher position that is modeled after what we found to be very successful at Forest Hills High School, where you take teacher leaders who will still be teaching classes, but you free up some of their period so that they can coach, model, and observe other teachers, particularly new teachers. And so that is one of the innovative practices that the grant asks you to test over 3 years to see, did it make a difference? And if it did make a difference, could you take something like that practice and scale that up? And that's the purpose of the grant. But Dr. Jones, if you want to give an overview, and we can send a full board detail, but this is separate and unique from our local budget.
So your questions come in a timely manner, as that you approved Dr. Kim Schroeder to serve as the manager of the grant. That's one of the last pieces personnel-wide we've put in regarding leading the grant. So when she came in this past week, Dr. Houlihan and I met, and he asked for an update on what has been done thus far with the grant, then where we are, and where we're headed. We actually present that to him on Monday. I met with Dr. Schroeder, Dr. Crawford, and Dr. Healy on Monday. No, last Friday I met with them, and they have 1 week, and I'm meeting with them this Friday for that presentation to go over. We'll be presenting it then in cabinet next week, and then we certainly can give the information to you. I do remind you that they meet every Friday with the grant manager. That was approved, of course, and you approved that in your consent agenda. But they meet every Friday to go over the oversight to make sure that any of the expenditures are aligned with the grant. So we can provide that to you, and we're working on it right now.
We need, oh, sorry. go ahead.
And I think it's important to know that when we're looking at our budget, we're looking at our budget and we're looking at operating and recurring, and the grant is grant specific and it's to supplement. It is not to take over anything because it's time sensitive.
It is not to supplant. You
Right.
can't, you can
Right.
supplement, but you cannot supplant.
Right. So it's just important to note when we're looking at all of that.
I realize that. So the next question I have is for those 13 high priority schools, for the counselors and social workers, could that LIF money not be used in those positions?
No, it cannot.
Why? It's not a position that's there now.
Well, part of this grant, you have to apply for the federal dollars through an application process based on a number of certain programmatic efforts you want to make. The grant, the reason for the grant is teacher leadership, teacher and school leadership. So your efforts have to be focused on principal development, future principal development, and teacher leadership. There's nothing in the grant or even in the application that speaks to wraparound services, social work, counseling support. That's not part of this federal program.
My question is, you mentioned stipends. So we got money in our budget last year for stipends, and I fully understand that the grant is a little bit different. How do these stipends differ than the ones that we put in last year's operating budget that I assume continue in this year's operating budget?
The stipends in the grant, and Dr. Jones may have the detail because I don't want to say something incorrectly. One of the stipends, as an example, is an attendance stipend, which is, I believe, if you come as a teacher, you come to school for a certain number or don't miss a certain number of days. That is not part of the stipend that we give in our focus schools, as an example, for teachers. That's just one. But Dr. Jones, can you speak to other stipends?
And I don't have a list of all the stipends, but the stipends, of course, many of them are targeted for the schools for teacher retention, as well as attracting teachers to come to those schools.
Yeah, if
We can provide the
Yeah,
specifics
that
on
would
that.
be great.
Great. Yes, that's easily done.
Where are we at? When did we get the first grant money, year one? When did it start? And how much of that have we dispersed?
I can't tell you that. Dr. Jones or Mr. Covington will have to work with you on that. I know that it technically did not start until, I want to say, October or November of this current year. In terms of when we were awarded the dollars, I can't tell you, but programmatically, we did not start this work until the late of the first semester.
The authorization to start expending the funds started October 1, but we
So
didn't
it
really.
was October 1 to September 30.
Yes,
Okay. So I would imagine y'all have a running tally of what we've spent and what we've got to spend
yes,
left.
yes, sir.
Would that not need to come to the board at least for us to bless?
The requirements
Did.
that come to the board is the approval of either the grant itself, or if there's a contract that reaches the authority that comes to the board for you all's approval. But the day-to-day operations of running the grant doesn't need board approval.
Unless we ask for it to be done.
You can always
Yes,
ask
you
for
can
an
always
update.
request for an update.
So basic,
It did come to the board a year ago. I don't have the month, but I remember a couple of different presentations when we voted on it. And
I remember us voting on the grant.
and them telling us what it would be used for, but we just haven't, at this point, we haven't received an update. And I think that's what I'm hearing is we would just like an update.
We're happy to do that.
But we did vote on it and they told us, what was in the grant, what it could and could not be used for. And
really the idea behind this is to identify what are some innovative best practices that you're not currently doing in your school system. That if you were to try these out, would it make an impact on academic achievement and on teacher retention and teacher quality? And that's really the point of the 3 years of the grant.
I think that personally, this budget workshop, I want to make sure we have a deadline to get to the county commissioners what we're asking for this, and maybe at our next board meeting, Madam Chair, I don't know if we can maybe have a detailed update and discussion on the current grant.
We'll be ready by then.
And another question goes back to the old zero-based budget or a modified zero-based budget. I hadn't seen that.
What would you like to see?
Well, how much are we going to have left over with this year's budget?
Until we get the audited financial statements, we won't have that answer, and that won't be until the October, November timeframe. We have to close out the year. That doesn't end to June 30th.
Okay, so back to this budget. Do we want to start with the superintendent's recommendation, and we can begin with page 3 is the timeline. So our goal, we are here at April 24th on our work session. We're going to have our joint meeting on Thursday, and at our May board meeting, we will be prepared to vote on the budget after tonight's work. And our goal is to send our request over to the county on May 7th and a formal presentation somewhere between the 8th and 18th. So that's page 3. Step in anywhere and board, if you have any questions, let's just go page by page and let me know where your questions are.
As part of the finance committee at the last meeting, we had some questions and follow-up. Were those given to all the board members or just the finance committee members?
Just finance committee.
Okay, I'll forward that to the rest of the board, so at least they have the same. I didn't notice that.
Have you received the answers to your questions from
I have
finance?
received, but I have some more. Yeah, I mean, I have
Okay.
some follow-up is a better
Okay.
word.
Is
Yeah.
it anything that we need to share and discuss tonight for this,
I'll
for
just
the
send it to
purposes of
people.
this meeting? Okay, thank
It'll
you.
be fine. Thanks.
And are those questions worth discussing with the full board since we're together tonight? Okay. Okay, are there any questions between pages 1 and 10?
Been no changes.
There's been no changes at all
No
since the
changes?
finance, right?
Correct.
Okay.
From what I'm hearing, there's probably going to be a 1.5 cent. They're going to probably try to reduce the tax rate 1.5 cent. But I don't know how that's going to work out in math. And I would assume,
Well, I don't know. I heard that it's a penny and a half on their own, not on us,
not total.
not total.
I was thinking total.
It was hard to understand what they were, but
That's exactly
I
right.
think we have to put forth our budget and what it
Mhm.
is and go from there because we just don't have any idea.
Mhm. But your understanding was that was on the county side?
County.
not-
My understanding it was that they asked the county, they asked Cindy Cotto to reduce her budget by a penny to a penny and a half.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Melissa, I've heard everything, every answer possible, so I call it plausible deniability.
Mhm.
Well, I'm just saying what was on the tape.
I'm talking about the county,
Right.
not
And our
us.
tax rate was cut last year, pretty significantly more than any other, area on the county budget. So, I think, giving up 3 million in our capital projects last year and getting our tax rate, cut last year, in essence, we did pay for our own bond. I'm not sure that SPCC or the libraries paid their part of the bond, but with our cuts, Union County Public Schools definitely paid for our portion of the bond.
And I'm very much looking forward to Thursday night's meeting because I cannot get my mind wrapped around the fact that we're not getting cheated out of our true-up money every year.
Well, also, there's an interesting dynamic this year in that they are short one commissioner. And if my timeline serves me correctly, if they don't fill the position, the clerk of the court will. And conceivably, when you only have 5 commissioners, whoever fills that spot could play a very crucial role in budget decisions for the next year. So I will assume, unless something has changed and they've had a meeting or plan on having one before Thursday, that they'll still have that vacancy Thursday night. And very conceivable, the way they sit right now, deadlocked 2-2, or
I think they
whatever
said they
comes-
wanted to wait till after the primary was over, which is on the 8th, which is after we've,
Approved our budget.
well, it's after we've
after we
delivered our
send it
budget.
to them, yeah.
So,
And I think it's worth mentioning that as far as scheduled joint meetings, Thursday night is the only one. So I think it's very important. This not just be a show and then everybody goes home. This needs to be a frank dialogue with the commissioners. I don't want to see us put our, being told to put our needs forward, and then we make a presentation, no comments, no feedback, no information is shared, and then they go into their budget deliberations, and all of a sudden stuff comes up right and left about our budget, and we're not there to discuss, and decisions are made without us being able to give feedback and information that might be helpful in their decision-making process. So I think it's very crucial that Thursday night we have an open dialogue. And I trust that we've provided this information to their staff early enough that it can be digested in time. This is not going to be Thursday night the first time they're going to see this, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that we're going to try to do that. I mean, to the extent that we can draw out questions and stuff, that's a great idea. But
Gary, I agree with you 100%, but I think we also, you as finance chair, should maybe encourage them to us have another joint meeting, because to give them the opportunity to talk to us about it. And I want everybody to understand, I'm on board for the 44.51 equals about 119.
I believe so.
That's not an argument. It's like me and Ms. Heintel says, we don't have a tax rate, but we do have a tax rate. It's how we spend it. And I'm about ready to tell them, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house.
Okay, very good discussion. So, any questions starting after page 15?
Well, hold, I'm going to go back to, I guess, page 11.
Okay.
Do we have any further information, rumors, what have you, from the state that might affect any of these projected employee pay raises that we need to be prepared to match on our side?
No, sir. That's the most current information.
what about the information that's out there about the state providing funding for more social workers, mental health?
So,
And
that's exactly where I was about to go. You got there first. Just yesterday, the state committee on school safety released a report recommending 6 key recommendations for the General Assembly to consider. I haven't memorized all 6 of them, but one of them that I know is getting heavy consideration is funding additional positions for school nurses. That has been one that the General Assembly has been really big on looking at. Right now, we do not have a dedicated nurse for every school. We have nurses that are shared between and amongst schools. So that's one. A second one is funding additional counselors. That feedback has been given, that those positions really need to be doubled down. In addition to school psychologist has been a recommendation, and teacher training on some of what we've already been talking about in terms of early warning signs. And I can't remember what the other ones are. But to be honest, that's just been a report that's been recommended. There's been no discussion because none of the information is in session yet.
And if this comes about, it would be part of the governor's or even the final budget package, which we won't know about until
July.
June or July even.
Correct.
Yeah, or
Correct.
September. Yeah.
That will be a first.
Yeah.
If it's in July.
It is, yeah. So we have to go in presuming that, hey, that's great if you do it, but we can't bank on it.
I correct. My kind of position on this is we need to deliver a budget that is based on what we feel like we need, no matter what the state does. And if whatever the state does for us on top of what we are asking for, that's even better.
Dr. Houlihan, I have a question about these social workers. Now, let's say we have a child that starts off in elementary school doing great, and then as he progresses up through the grades, we see a deterioration and they just feel like something's going on. Am I to imagine that these social workers will be going and visiting the home environment?
That will be part of their job. Yes.
And I know it exists. When they go out there and they realize the child's problem is they live in a toxic home environment, what happens then?
I believe that anytime we have a school-based employee, and Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong, a school-based employee, whenever you do a home visit, whether that's a social worker, a counselor, or a principal, and you walk into a situation that you believe to be neglectful or abusive or, as you said, toxic, you're required by the code of ethics to report that to a higher authority. And in this case, it could be law enforcement, it could be DSS, it could be whatever agency overrules that particular issue.
I understand that, but are we going to immediately throw that child a life preserver and not, I mean, if it's bad, are we going to set a chain of events in motion that could cause that child problems in his home environment by the social worker following him home? Because we're seeing, I mean, the child definitely needs help.
It would never be our intent or position to further damage or escalate a child's experience at home or at school. I mean, the idea around the social worker piece in particular is really around wraparound services. We have a tremendous amount of families that don't know what resources are out there to help them. And that could be everything from, laundry service to where to find meals to shelters that are available. A lot of our families just don't know how to access these resources. And that's a big part of what our school social workers would be doing.
And those are all good things. I'm just worried about the situations I hear of that are really.
Well, the flip side of it is right now, when we have a child that's going through something like that, we don't have enough personnel to help them. And this proposal over 3 years would do that, would give all of our kids and all of our clusters access to more bodies that can help them.
I guess the only thing that on the counselors is and looking at what the thing is over 3 years, it confuses me why some schools got what they got and others didn't get what they got. And if you could just speak to that kind of in general, not in specifics, but some got more guidance counselors and some didn't get any guidance counselors. Some got more social workers, some got one. So,
generally speaking, under Dr. Faust's leadership, we formed basically a task force that included principals, social workers, mental health therapists that are currently working in our school system. And so what you see is their recommendation to me as superintendent. They recommended these positions be allocated over the course of 3 years. Now, if the board wants us to look at different allocations for different schools, we're certainly able to entertain that. But they looked at demographics, school size, trends in terms of their caseload, and the needs of those schools. And in some cases, this task force recommended that this school in particular, because of the population, really would be much more beneficial from a social worker as opposed to a counselor. And all of our clusters, I believe, were represented. I'm not sure how widely, but this was the recommendation from this group. and they assessed the current systems in place at all of our schools. I know that one of them is Sun Valley as an example. We tried to allocate 5 additional counseling positions for our 5 largest high schools. Sun Valley, the needs of Sun Valley High School as came from this task force was not necessarily counseling, but it was social worker. They needed a dedicated social worker that could help these families. Now, with that said, I would also say that every single high school and middle school and elementary school definitely needs more counselors, for sure. But in looking at the needs of the school, this was just our starting point.
Could you summarize again, year 1 of the 3-year phase-in, what positions that would entail for year 1? Can you
Go back to
It's in the thing that he sent us. It's 10.
Yeah.
It's 2 counselors, 10 social workers, and 5 mental health therapists.
Correct.
It's slide 15.
Pardon?
Slide 15. Slide 15. It's up on the screen.
This is
And the lead counselor, just a comment. It's notated here, it's a central office position. I would like to encourage the lead counselor to actually be housed in a school,
That will be
centrally located.
That is our plan, Mr. Sides.
Okay.
We do not have any intent for the lead counselor to actually be in central services in an office. This individual will actually be housed in a school, possibly actually providing counseling services, but could actually help with things like training. Right now, our high school counselors have told me when they have a question, there's no one in centrally to go to that can give a common, consistent answer. All of their questions are being answered
Change that then.
we can change this, yes. It would be a school-based position, but supporting all high school counselors, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, if we just define that a little bit more and take out the central
Yeah.
office, it would be great.
It would be the same thing as our lead social worker, which is going to be basically a stipend to help that person extend their, right now they're on a 10.5 months. This would help them go to 12 months. And, but our lead social workers are not in central office. They're actually out in the community and in schools. So we can change that on the slide to make that.
But there's a
Make that point
difference
known.
between the stipend lead social worker and the lead counselor.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to.
I don't know if this is a fair analogy, but as far as our SROs go, we don't employ our own security staff. We use the sheriff.
I believe the only,
Well, the city of Monroe and
right, but I
Just
think we
law.
do, and Mr. Covington can correct me, I think the only SRO positions that we fund are the ones that support like central office, central services.
right.
We have multiple buildings but it's like 2 or 3.
Well, here's where I'm going
Not in
with this.
schools.
We have private security in some
Right.
of our others.
Well, here's where I'm going with this. The county also has social workers, mental health therapists in the HS department. I feel we're going to get challenged on, are we trying to recreate the wheel by having our own employees versus utilizing the services of the county for these needs?
I can talk for a long time about this particular subject, but I'll try to be brief. I've sent you all a memo outlining our staff's position on this subject. And to be honest with you, it is very easy, I think, for the general public to think a social worker is a social worker. That is not the case when it comes to education. In the K-12 setting, a school social worker has different certifications, has different licenses, has different training, has different experiences, and is intended to be a proactive position, meaning you try to help kids on the front end before they walk down the road of getting into danger. You try to identify issues that are occurring that you can help them with solving before they are referred to another agency. The social worker positions in a county agency like DSS is the complete opposite. They are much more reactive, and they typically only work with families and students in one of 2 ways. If there are children that are in neglectful or, as Mr. Rape says, toxic environments, or to be honest with you, when they get a referral for abuse. And those social workers do not have the same licensure. They don't have the same certification. They don't attend our trainings. And so the key word here, I think, is alignment. I think we would have to have a plan in place to work alongside of our county agencies. But our position is that these need to be UCPS employees because of the alignment to the school. They need to be dedicated to those clusters. Your social workers and DSS could be supporting non-UCPS families because they are county agency. We want to keep this centrally in our budget for our kids.
What would these mental health therapists and social workers be doing during the summer break? Would they still be working active cases?
They would be.
So they're going to be 12 months. They're not going to take the summer off.
I don't know about all of them, and I don't know where Dr. Barnes is, but
Okay.
the mental health. Okay, social workers are 10 months.
Okay.
What would mental health therapists do?
They are currently listed as 10-month employees right now.
And mental health or just social worker? All of them?
All of them. All. And they'll work on a teacher schedule.
The only thing about that, those children, if we're making progress with that child, there's going to be a void in there. I mean, let me give some of my experiences. I rent to a lot of poverty level people. I have 22 houses and probably 15 of them are poverty level. I work with the county. The county pays 1 month of their rent already. Their whole problem is money management, and it flows over into the children. These social workers, I agree we need control of them, but they need to work very closely with HS to know what programs are available because, as you said about free meals and stuff like that, they need to know what they can do and who to hook them up with.
I agree with you 100%. I think if the board would like, we can certainly look at what would the additional cost be if these individuals were 12-month as opposed to 10, just so that you have that information. Not saying that we would do it, but if you'd like to see what that net difference would be, Mr. Covington can run those numbers.
I would. I think the needs are going to go 12 months out of the year, not just 10. And if we're going to be all in, we need to be all in.
That's my point. That child will suffer. If we're making progress during the school year, then we need to make progress through the summer.
Are we referring to all the positions, including the counselors? And the reason I ask is because we have counselors now that's funded by the state for 10 months. That means you would have to pick up extra 2 months on all counselors.
I think what I heard were the social workers and mental health therapists first.
Those 15 positions. So I assume if it's a 10-month contract, it's not annualized, taking the annualized pay and just paying it over 10 months. It's adjusting their remuneration accordingly on 10 out of 12 months. I'm correct?
They will have to be paid on the state pay scale as a 10-month, like the 10-month, and then you have to add 2 more months. So no, you wouldn't spread their 10-month salary over 12.
Gotcha.
They would get an extra 2 months of salary.
So the extra 2 months would have to come out of our local funds if the
Yes.
state only allots for 10 months?
Correct.
Okay.
What educational requirements, what's the educational requirements difference between a social worker and a teacher with a master's degree?
That's all, just so everybody knows. At the back of what the finance committee got, there's a list of each of the requirements for each of the jobs too, so you have it too. Sorry.
No, you're fine. This social worker will require some master's in social work, and the counselor has a master's in school counseling. If you look at the state average salaries for teachers, counselors, and mental health therapists, the average teacher receives about $47,000 a year, and the average social worker and counselor is $52,000. Part of the difference in pay is that some teachers don't have a master's degree, and every counselor and social worker has to have one. And that's just the state's average salary schedule for those folks.
Well, was I mistaken? Aren't these social workers coming in at 75,000 per year, or is that
That includes benefits, retirement.
benefits and
Yes, sir.
everything else?
Okay, so these are 10 new positions. How many do we currently have that we be looking at? Do you have a off the top of your head?
You have social workers, you have, I believe, well, remember, you have the ones that you allocated in last year's budget to go to our 6 focus schools that are dedicated. And then you only have 3 other ones that support the rest of the school system.
So we're looking at extending to 12 months, all, not just the positions we're adding in this year's budget.
Correct.
What page are you on, Gary? You're on 15.
And as a drop back position, and this would be for staff and the professionals determined, and of course, based on caseload, maybe we don't need all of them to be on 12 months positions. You know, maybe it's an option that half of them are working 12 months and the other half are on 10, due to monetary constraints. Is that?
We would have to evaluate that, and it might be a case-by-case basis based on the needs of the certain cluster, but we can look at what the total additional cost would be, and if we get to that point that it changes the budget as a recommendation, we can come back to you on that.
Guidance counselors is they put them on 11 months, so we could do 11-month employments and split them up so that they're covered all summer.
And back to guidance counselors and the Sun Valley discussion, it still worries me a little bit that they're not getting an additional guidance counselor as well, given the ratios that you sent us before and the comparison to the different schools, especially given grandfathering and what it's going to look like in the size of the school for the next couple of years. I would just ask to take another look at that a little bit.
We will be glad to do that. I will say the original ratios that I sent to you from Chris Barnes a while back did not include dropout prevention coordinators or college access coordinators. Both of those are at Sun Valley High School and several other schools. But we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and then just let us know.
If we ended up adding that for that particular school, it would not be that much of an additional cost in year 1.
Yeah, it had some dropout coordinators, but maybe Sun Valley's doesn't show it needing one or doesn't show it having one. It says there's 4 other schools that have them, but not Sun Valley.
So in this phase in for 2018-19, some of our schools are getting, 3 new positions. Some schools are getting 2. Some schools are only getting 1. For the schools like Porter Ridge High School or Weddington High School, or Marvin High School, how do we understand that they don't need 2 of the other positions? Why do they only get 1?
I think they would all tell you we need more than 1. But when you look at phasing, the task force gave us the recommendation based on input, based on caseload, based on need. And to be honest, it is not easy to slice this 3 ways. You can't take these numbers and really do it so that everyone gets the same thing every year.
Yeah, so the next year, Porter Ridge gets more.
Right.
The goal was to ensure that every
They get
year,
4.
every cluster gets at least 1 position, unless those positions are fed or sped through in your first 2 years. Like I think there's 1 cluster that would not get any positions in year 3 because the recommendation had them getting them in years 1 and 2.
Right, like
I think
I'm sorry.
I think it'd be helpful too, because looking back at what they currently have, because
That's what I wanted to
Mhm.
understand.
Right, because-
Is there a reason why
I agree.
some schools are only getting 1 and some schools are getting 3?
And then some are getting 1 and the next year they're getting 3. Some are getting 3 and the next year getting
Yeah.
2. If we could see them side by side, it might be
Right.
easier too.
Well, and right now, when you look at social workers as an example, they don't have any. There's only 3 that support the entire
Right.
school system.
Right.
So there really isn't anything to compare it to except for counselors. And again, remember, these support the cluster, not just a high school. So when you look at the number of schools in a cluster, that also makes a difference, where you have more schools like in the Monroe cluster than you do in the Cuthbertson cluster. your needs are different and you have more students that you need to assist.
Didn't we add social workers though to Monroe cluster last year? How many did we, I mean, that was part of the funding that we got from the county at county
Correct.
level.
That was dedicated to 3 elementary schools and Monroe Middle, positions. And they weren't all social workers. They were mental health therapist or a social worker for the elementaries, and one dedicated social worker and a mental health therapist at Monroe Middle. And our plan would be those would continue to be in place. But in the Monroe cluster, you have more schools that did not receive any dedicated support, like Rocky River, Monroe High School, and other schools in the area.
I think the difficulty in looking at it all for me, I'll speak for me, is that the sheet that we got originally from you with guidance counselors and some dropout prevention counselors was by school. And now everything's by cluster. So if we could get comparative information of what's existing today in each cluster and then what's going into each cluster in fiscal 19, fiscal 20, and fiscal 21.
So you want to broken down by school?
No, by cluster is fine.
The same
I just
with
want to be able to
apples.
understand
Stick
what
with
we're
cluster.
doing, right?
We can work on that. I probably won't be able to have that for you until end of the week at the earliest. I mean, I can't have it probably by Thursday, but we can work on it.
Okay, so we are on slide 15. Are there any other questions from 15? Okay. Human capital on slide 16. Any questions?
Just so everybody knows, I asked the question, or somebody in finance asked the question about state mandated salary increases and what employees are not covered by state mandate salary increases, and its principals are the only category of personnel that aren't covered. So that pretty much covers everybody.
And for what it's worth, that topic will probably come back to the General Assembly in the next session.
Okay.
In terms of the manner in which we're
I'm just
currently
trying to look through
paying
what we're
principals.
doing at the same time. One of the questions that I asked, was there any other salary increases in the proposed budget? And if there's any stipend increases? And I guess at some point I want to bring up, I've gotten some emails, and it's been brought up over the last month or so about coaching stipends. My understanding is from somebody I talked to today that it's been 15 plus years since we've adjusted stipends for coaches. And
yes, we did discuss this issue as a senior leadership team. I know that our neighboring school system has proposed to give a 20% increase across the board for all coaching supplements. To be honest, I feel like we probably need to do something. It's been way too long. I did ask for the numbers on this, and for us, if we were to do a 20% increase across the board, that would cost us $155,000. If you wanted to do 25% or 30%, obviously that number is going to be in the 200 plus ballpark. But this is another category of employees, much like your skill labor in terms of market increases that across the board need to be looked at.
somebody sent me information about the number of state championships we've won and second places and third places over the last 10 years. And it's remarkable what they do and the amount of time they put in. I'd like to see us try to do something for, especially if it's, is it true that it's been that long?
I heard it's been like over 20 years.
That's what I've heard as well. And with the amount of time that our coaches dedicate on and off the field, it's not just on the field, it's off the field as well. I really think that we should wholeheartedly look into adding a new stipend for them as well.
I agree. I agree.
How about if we make a down payment of say 10% this year?
No, we should do 20%.
No,
we're 20 years behind.
Like 20 years, they have not had an increase. 20 years, they haven't had any increases.
So,
and these people spend a lot of time away from their families to help our kids, and it's basically a slap in their face because other counties around us are getting funded for these increases for coaching, and we're doing nothing. We've increased funding for bus drivers and maintenance, but we're not doing anything for our coaches, who are not only teachers, they're also coaches.
I just need to clarify, these are volunteers, it's a stipend, they're not employees.
Right, we're talking, I said stipend.
No, I know, but I'm just, they're not all employed by us.
No, not all of them are employees. There's a lot of them that are employees.
But we just have to be careful because the law creates, they have to be a volunteer. We have to continue to make sure that we treat them that way. Otherwise you have other legal issues that come into play. So
how does that relate to giving them
it doesn't.
Oh,
I just want to make sure we're clear on the discussion. That's a stipend.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yes.
It can't be related to wins, losses, how much time they spend.
All I meant about the number of wins is the amount of time putting in to get those 50.
Well, and the fact that when unfortunately, the state doesn't run the data like this, because I really want to see how that compares to other counties. But what I'll tell you is our school system, from an athletic standpoint, is really head and shoulders above a lot, if not all other school systems in terms of championships.
Not only brings prestige to our system.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of time that they spend whether we win or lose.
I'm not saying the winning coaches.
I'm just talking for me.
Yeah. If we're to make a recommendation, what I would say is, I don't believe we should pick different coaching positions for different sports and say this position gets this and would increase this here. I'm looking at it across the board. If you said a 20% increase for all or a 30% increase for all.
Well, I guess I'd be interested to see what Doug Jones thinks, since he's our head AD, what he thinks would be something that we should do.
Are there different stipend amounts per sports or as an assistant coach?
Yes.
And
Elite
so
coach,
you have it already some kind of a ladder depending on what sport and assistant coach, of course, versus head coach.
Yes, so you have a variance depending upon.
So you're taking your 155,000 is taking 20% no matter where you are on the ladder.
That, by the way, that doesn't include benefits, any kind of benefit. So I have to look at that.
Well, they don't get benefits because they're volunteers.
Okay. They're contract. So they're basically a contracted employee, a 1099.
Yeah.
Well, how about if they're an employee, a teacher that's a coach?
Unless they're an employee.
It's separate from
It's completely separate.
It's separate from their employment status. They're a volunteer coach in addition to being.
By law, they can't get benefits attached to their coaching stipends.
So is it a 1099 basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I would like Doug Jones to weigh in on this. If it's, or I guess have you already, if this is something you discussed, you said before, is there a recommendation that it be 20% across the board? Because it's been so long.
Dr. Barnes?
If I can raise a caution, we have worked on a compensation study to look at all of our employees and bringing them up to market value. My only concern I would want to raise is that we have looking at a 3 or 4 year plan to try to bring all of our employees up to market value. That would cost about 1.4 million if you put all of our employees that are underpaid and not paid effectively.
But these are volunteers.
And I would really be concerned about putting a stipend for volunteers ahead of fixing our salaries for our full-time employees.
I think that we've given, I mean, I don't disagree that we have some employees who are underpaid.
And we have a plan to address that.
Right, but we've given raises, the state's given raises over time. This is 20 plus years of no increase whatsoever. Are there other people in our school system have gone 20 years without an increase?
No.
I think the issue at hand is that we have employees we've stalled out on the salary chart, and we have people who haven't had the salary increase beyond what the state gave, and they're overall making less than all the other counties around us. Teacher assistants, for example, or our certified
about stipends though for teacher assistant or teachers, and we're told that we're marketable. I want to know if there's stipends we should be we have given stipends out of local funds to teachers and TAs before. Should we be doing that in this budget as well?
Well, it is not a stipend for them. It's
supplement. Excuse me, I used the wrong.
Well, no, but it's fixing their salary so that they're competitive with other districts around us. What's happened is a lot of times our teacher assistants, if you come in as a teacher assistant at year 0, you're making the same as a teacher assistant at year 10.
and the cost of spreading them along the scale and getting them all to the right place is what that funding would cost. And that's kind of, I mean, it's in the budget line item to fix our skilled labor force this year, but there are several other groups that we have not addressed simply for funding reasons.
I know in 2015, after Mrs. Boyd, Mr. Size, myself joined this board, we looked into the coaches, and even in 2015, 3 years ago, when I remember this conversation coming up, we asked to see the coaches surrounding Union County. And even then, 3 years ago, when we made this request and started asking questions for our coaches were significantly receiving less than the surrounding counties. And we're 3 years down the road and we still haven't done anything for the coaches. So I think now is an appropriate time for the board to decide, what we want to do.
And I want to go back to your comment about teacher assistants, trying to get them up to market value. That has to be accomplished through supplements because their salaries is set by the state, correct?
Thank you. Teacher salaries are, teacher assistants and other classified people are not. They're set, each district sets their own salary schedule for them.
So we're not paying teacher assistants what they can make in Mecklenburg or Cabarrus County.
No, sir.
Shame on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the first I've heard. So why isn't it in this year's budget? How much money are we talking about to get the TAs up to where
Well,
they need to be?
and I don't want to speak just to TAs. It's actually, we broke out about 6 or 7 categories. Cafeteria, transportation, teacher assistant, skilled labor, and then our central office and office staff. The total cost of that would be over $1 million. So we decided that it would be more appropriate to break it down and do it in pieces that are easier to absorb.
The idea, you only have a certain pot of money to do anything that you want to do in terms of above and beyond or increases. And so to be honest with you, the recommendation came from phasing in, as Dr. Barnes just said, those groups of employees, starting with your skilled labor, because this year's budget, our priority has been the social and emotional learning piece. That has been the priority and the major feedback we've gotten from our stakeholders. And so this board will have to make a decision on what is the priority of the board and where would you like to invest?
I would like to know so in the $1.4 million you're talking about, what's the breakdown of the type of category of employees that you're talking about? I mean, this is the first we've even heard that.
So in this budget, as far as it's staff's feeling, as far as market adjustments for compensation, that the skilled labor is the first one, and that is a cost of $286,860.
Correct. And those were the folks that were farthest away from what the market value should be.
Okay.
And we obviously didn't go market value of what they could work in the private sector, but the market value in other school systems along the same.
And you did not study the coach's stipend because that's volunteer. That was not part of your.
It's obviously with 5,000 employees, it's a lot to analyze. So we started with their salaries first.
No, I mean, as far as a longer range plan for bringing employees' compensation up to market, you did not factor in the coach's stipend as part of that.
Not in this study. No, I have a separate one about what the surrounding counties are paying coaches. I have that study for you as well.
Because a lot of our coaches are not employees.
So is the idea that next year you're going to add the whole $1.4 million to the budget to take care of that? Or I'm just trying to understand. Or is it fake?
Yeah. What I did is I created a 3 and a 5 year phase-in plan because it is a lot of money to absorb at one time. And we need to remember that once we fix those salaries, that becomes the new salary schedule. So it would, we would be putting more money every year into those.
Right. It's just like, yeah.
And on top of it.
Yeah.
So is this utilizing just the skilled labor in this year? Is that the 3 year or is that the 5 year?
It's phase one. It's actually, it could be either one. I built the skilled labor first in either plan. This was the first one to fix.
But I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to do it in 3 years instead of 5, is there another class of employees that needs to be included there too? versus if we're going to stretch it out to 5 years?
When we did the 3 and the 5-year plan, with the budget constraints we had this year, I just put this one forward. So yes, we could add more, but obviously we'd have to work the budget over again.
Dr. Barnes, would it be a fair question, or I want to ask you, aside from department heads and central services, does everybody below department heads get a supplement in central services?
I'm sorry, I don't think that they do. That's not the case. Our teachers get supplements, our people working with students do, but the rest of the folks do not.
They do.
Some central staff do get supplements. Okay, I'd have to get the breakdown from specifically who.
Do what?
I guess it has to do with their classification, if they're classified as an educator or teacher.
No.
No, we do have some central office that part of their salary is said title supplement.
A lot. It's a good amount.
So facilities people what area of the facilities department are we looking at this year?
Skilled workforce.
Skilled workforce. What's next on the 3 or 5 year plan?
The other main category, thank you. The other main categories involve cafeteria workers, transportation, teacher assistants, and then office staff. Those are the larger categories that still remain.
And then coaches and things like that would fall at the bottom of that list.
Well, coaches were a separate, the compensation study, we went to salaries. I didn't look at coaching supplements. I do have I've asked my compensation analyst to look at the surrounding counties and their coaching supplements. And I can get that for you guys as well, what they pay in other districts. But we did that differently from simply looking at the salaries. That was the first place to look.
When you say transportation, I assume, are you talking about the non-driver?
Correct.
Transportation
The bus
employees?
drivers are now well compensated. So this is the rest of the folks, the mechanics and the folks that are in the transportation department but don't drive buses.
I'm curious, can we get a list of all the people that y'all are discussing, the different departments, the cafeteria, the maintenance, the ones that don't necessarily drive a bus but are in the transportation department? When was the last time each of those departments received raises and the amount that if it was a 10% raise or a 15% raise? Can we get that number as well, please?
Whenever the state does a cost of living increase or a raise, they have received those all the way along. The problem has been that we haven't moved them along the scale. So there's been no compensation for how long they've been working or how long they've been doing their job. So the cost of this really isn't to pay them for back pay or anything like that. It's just to move them across the scale away from each other so that if I've been an electrician for 5 years and I've been an electrician for 15 years, that I'm paid differently.
Right.
But yes, I can provide that all to you. I was waiting to kind of give you the whole compensation study when it was ready, but we wanted to make sure we at least addressed the glaring issue this year, which was our skilled labor force.
Dr. Barnes and Mr. Covington, could you furnish us with the list or dollar amount of supplement that's paid to non-instructional employees of Union County Public Schools?
Of course, we can get that. Yeah.
Because I know there's some in facilities that receive supplements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to circle back around, am I hearing that we want to clarify and see some work done on what it will absolutely cost to give a 20%? Are we going to try to vet whether it should be 20%, 25% for coaches?
In addition, yes. In addition to that, I want to see. Sorry. In addition to that, I'd like to see this 5-year plan and what it says in it right now.
And then the 5-year plan.
And I would remind the chair and Dr. Houlihan, Thursday night, you're going to be, do we have anything in this budget for band uniforms? Any help to them?
No, the current funding source for bands are band boosters. Historically, the school system has not covered the cost for bands except for, I want to say in 2 particular cases, I believe instruments were provided, but that was many years ago.
Well, back at the meeting that Commissioner Helms came to, he asked y'all to include that in your budget. You were both nodding yes.
we'll be happy to look at that, but we have historically never done that.
Because we haven't done
I know.
it historically doesn't mean we can't do
And
it.
I want to
ROTC.
remind the board that we're doing our work session. Is there something that you want to put in? This is
Mhm.
our chance. You
Yeah.
don't have to like put it in, If you want to put in money for band, put it in. This is our chance.
Well, let me go a little bit further than band. Let's, beyond the core sports, football, basketball, what have you, are basically funded uniforms, equipment, referees, what have you. Not having had a child in cheerleading or band or, but having one in junior ROTC, I understand, remember a little bit of that funding model. I think it's more, the question is maybe more than just band. It's these other student activities, which in many kids' lives can be just as important. I think we would all agree junior ROTC that leads to a career in the military is a very important piece of the student's life. And so I don't know what, beyond just band, some of these other activities and their funding models would be helpful too.
Gary, I support that 100%. ROTC is extremely character building.
Let me caution you all on something right quick. We brought to you all a balanced budget. So everything that you all wish to add to the budget, that means something has to come off the budget. Meaning it's going to be a higher priority than what's listed on the detailed changes.
We understand that.
Or I guess my feedback I'd like from the board is we've been working on a number of 119 million and trying to present that to the county and to you all because that's what we project to receive. Would you like for us to remain in that ballpark of 119? And if so, to Mr. Covington's point, we would need to reevaluate what we are currently proposing and begin making cuts so that we can have that money go to other priorities. Or would you like for us to present a budget that might go above the 119 based on your feedback and other items that you would like to add in? Those are the two scenarios here that we have to figure
Speaking
out.
for myself, I don't want to go above 119 because that's at least our tax rate times what they think the tax base will be next year, and we can justify that. I don't want to make any I don't want what?
I was going to agree with you.
Okay, and I don't want to make any changes to anything until we see numbers. I mean, we're working without numbers and without information, and I would just like to see it first. And then we can make decisions on, as a board, this is me speaking.
I agree.
As a board, we can make decisions if we want something added, and then we have to find something to
Exactly.
take out.
I think if the board puts it on, the board needs to figure out where it comes off.
And the disposition of true-up money after Thursday night the outcome of convincing them that it's a shell game and I don't never get to see the peanut because it gets moved to the next year.
That's all. That's
all.
one time.
One-time
That's
money.
one-time capital
project.
money.
That's not. That's one time every year.
Yeah, but you can't budget it consistently because you don't know what it's going to be from year to year. It has to be one-time use.
So I think their policy is the true up money can only be used for one-time projects.
Well, we could get some of this money out of CIP because we're going to get if we get 3 million early.
But I think that we're going to have to somehow either the finance committee come back together or something and look at everything once it's come back or next Tuesday's Board of Education meeting, and then try to make recommendations to the board, or at least bring it to the board in some sort of cohesive thing that we can have a discussion on it next Tuesday night.
Right.
So can I just to recap on salaries and positions? What the board, I just want to make sure I've got it all so we don't miss anything. You've requested for a comprehensive look at coaching supplements. What would the cost be to increase our coaching supplements by 20 to 30%? I heard what would be the total cost to bring all of our other employee groups? Who are those groups that Dr. Barnes mentioned, and what would the cost be to bring them up to market? I believe that number is 1.4, 1.6 million, around there. But what I think you heard is what are the groups and what are the actual, what would the proposal be to phase them in over 3 years, over 5 years? And what would that cost be?
Well, can I interrupt for a second? I heard that the compensation study is not completed. So I don't know if that means that there are groups that have not been reviewed yet, that we may find, oops, instead of this group, that one needs to jump ahead. I'm not sure where exactly we are in the process.
I've completed for all the employees we currently have. What I'm working to do now is we have over 300 job titles in our district. I'm trying to make that a more reasonable number and then make sure that I've got everyone. So it's completed in the fact that I knew how much money approximately it's going to cost. It just wasn't ready for public consumption, for lack of a better word.
Okay. So those are the two big ones. Are there other employee categories that I missed that you would like to see a review on?
Well,
Taking the new positions to 12 months.
Correct. Taking the new positions to 12 months.
And, well, not just the new ones.
The new and the existing social workers and mental health therapists.
Yeah. And I guess I would like to see these other employee groups ranked as far as priorities as you see it now.
We have that.
Okay.
That's from the discussion. Those are the categories of employees I think I heard. I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. We didn't miss anything.
Okay. While we are on this topic, we've discussed employees, we've discussed volunteers. I would also like to have some numbers on the Board of Education. We are currently at $200 a month, and I would like to put out to the board to see how you feel about increasing the Board of Education's pay per month.
It wouldn't be effective if we did ask the county commissioners to increase our pay until after the November election, correct? I believe that it has to, right?
And the board, it's a Board of County Commissioners determines
I said that if they approved our, yes. Then it would not be applicable until December of this year.
Let me get a clarification.
But it was also my understanding that we had to do it in our budget. So it had to be done now, not November or October.
It's not de facto approved by the county if the funding is in our budget?
They have to know that we're asking for an increase in pay, this according to the state. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It has to be active approval.
Right, you have to put a line item that says Board of Ed compensation.
Okay, all right.
The other two staff heard that I heard is band and ROTC. What would be a plan for, or any other category of group? I know that in some systems with band, as an example, they fund new uniforms every year, and it's like 1 or 2 schools a year, and it's on a rotating basis. So costing what that might look like for us, I also heard as a request.
Okay.
I think that some of the stuff I understand.
Stop there. Okay. Okay, is there anything else on human capital for page 16? Okay, that brings us to the organizational improvements with tutoring, transportation. Any questions on slide 17?
I have a question. When will we have an idea of how many people will seek transportation for the IB program if we were to offer it?
I don't know. I think a lot of folks are waiting to hear whether or not that's going to be funded
For next year,
for next year.
as the application process, has that closed?
It has.
It's just a matter of whether they accept
And
or not.
and students have been notified if they were accepted or not, or.
And
So
he
this
said
is
that
based
30
on-
students
okay.
checked that if they would use transportation if
Approximately,
it was
yeah.
provided.
Or is like 20, 22, something, or about 12 of them said that they would need transportation.
I know that as soon as the board, if this goes through as planned, if this is approved, then the principal would be able to say to those families, this will be an option pending the full budget, but we can't make that promise to families until we know that it's funded.
Didn't I see somewhere the projected cost would be 100,000?
Yeah.
That's ball-
Yes.
And-
Ballpark, yes.
And does anybody know how many students that's projecting having to transport? All of them,
That's what I
basically?
just asked them.
All we know is that there are approximately 20 or so kids who have checked the box and said, if this is provided,
Okay.
we would take advantage of it.
All right.
And that's coming from all across the county.
So transporting roughly 20 kids would take 100,000 per year. We
Approximately.
depending on where they are, where they're coming from. Okay.
Okay, any other questions on 17? Okay, that brings us to the operating budget, slide 19. Okay, that shows that our intent to be within $119 million based on our tax rate for the schools. We've agreed that we want to try to stay within that. Slide 20.
Could I ask a quick question on this? Dennis, when the county gives you this figure, do they break it down, the formula down for you as to what collection rate they are using to project these revenue numbers?
No, they provided the adjusted penny value of the 2.6 million. And we know what our penny value rate is at 44.5. It's just a calculation.
All right.
They refused to give us a number this year.
Oh, okay.
Run that by me again.
They will not give us a target number for the budget this year. They will give you what the adjusted penny value is at the 2,612,456 time our penny rate, and they say you calculate it. So we won't be on record as giving you a number.
Okay, and that's from the county staff.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How long ago did you ask for that?
About the beginning of April.
April?
And it was adjusted right after they had their meeting where they took the adjusted penny value up to the current value.
Well, does that mean that we could be challenged on some of our base assumptions as far as what this revenue will come about? How much this will amount to?
No, sir. We use the number that they gave us as the adjusted penny value,
Okay.
and our penny rate stays the same. That's the assumption that we made in putting the budget together, that our penny rate would stay the same.
So the adjusted penny rate takes into account their collection rate and
Yes.
other factors. Okay. All right. So if their collection rate, their actual collection rate exceeds what they project, that in theory is where we come up with, part of it could be, that's the true.
That's the true up funding that you will get at the end of next year.
Okay.
That's still an estimate.
And they also gave us the utility 3% increase, correct?
They gave us a list of all the utility rates that they had received as the notices that were going up. And we, based on our projection, use a 3% average.
Is that taking into account City of Monroe as well?
Yes,
I guess Marshville, probably by utilities.
yes.
So Gary, it looks like you've moved to slide 20. Okay. So if everyone wants to be on the same page, I think we're on slide 20.
But with our,
Okay.
Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know this is Joe. I was able to join.
Hey, Joe.
Sorry for being late.
Okay, and we still have Christina and Matt.
I'm still here.
Thank you. Matt?
There.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, so just, Joe, we're on slide 20 of the superintendent's proposed budget. If you want to slide to that.
can I ask?
Yep, I'm following along.
Yes?
What did we tell them or ask to with respect to the BOE increase? Anything?
I didn't hear any.
I was going to say, I think we got off topic then right away.
Yeah, I think we started talking about ROTC and booster.
Yes.
What you thinking?
This actually, just to bring everyone up to speed, a few months ago when the county was going through their raises and their positions, the county reached out to me and asked me, what are you making? And then they asked for information on what do other boards of education receive. And I will tell you that if we're number 6 and you look at the other boards of education similar in size, Cumberland County, for example, is around $1,200 per month. Winston-Salem is over $700 per month. Guilford County is almost $1,800 per month. Durham County is $800 per month. Gaston County is almost $700 per month. And these are 2014 numbers. So when the county reached out to me, because they realized how many meetings we have to go to and how many committees we're on, appeals, and so I told them that we make $200 a month, and I think they had, this particular county commissioner was concerned that that there had not been an increase for our board. So not knowing that the answers to their questions, I reached out to the North Carolina School Board Association, and the most current information they had was 2014-15. So even the information I have for like CMS, for example, is not current to where they are today.
They just put in their budget, they have a request.
And I think their request right now is for $30,000 per year, is somewhere in that range. But also there are about 100,000 more students than Union County Public Schools. But if anyone would like a copy of this report from the North Carolina School Board Association, I'm happy to send it out to the board. But that gives you an idea. New Hanover is $962 per month, and they have 25,000 students. Onslow, 25,000 students. They're almost $430 per month. Robeson County, 23,000 students. They're $470 per month. And of course, the chair and the vice chair, usually has a small increase, a step up. So just wanted to let you guys know. Sometimes it's the chair and the vice chair. It varies.
I was talking about for here.
Right. Okay.
Just clarify. Just clarify.
From experience. So, it's really up to this board if that's something we want to work into this budget, because the county said that we would have to put it in our budget if we are to do this. And, so we can't do it in November or October. This time of year is the only time we can have this discussion and decide as a board, is this something we want to do or not do?
I think it's a very minuscule overall cost to at least try to. I think we all know that we didn't get into this to be compensated, but it would nice to have at least a partial offset for some of the costs we incur on our own, our time away from our families, and some of the uncompensated things we do, go to visit schools, etc. I think a modest change from that is not an out of line ask.
And I'll also, comment, none of us are here to have a salary for an elected position. But as you can see, we are significantly below other boards of education with significantly less students. And it should also be noted that our Board of County Commissioners are compensated extremely well for their travel and their time. And our local municipalities, our local mayors, town councils, from what I've heard in my area, it's, $400 or $500 a month for our municipalities. So even those elected officials are compensated as well. So if we're going to do it, we have to put it in this budget or we don't do it.
I think we should add it to the other things we've asked and take a look at it.
I have a question.
Yes, Christina.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell whose voice it was, but they said that the pay, if this is approved, and the pay would start in November, why would it not start at the next fiscal year?
In July?
Correct.
Michelle can correct me, but it's in the statute about it. I'll look. I'm almost positive that it's statute based, because you can't let me look it up.
And we need to clarify too, Michelle, that it has to be in the school's budget, not the county's budget, but the county decides whether we do or do not get it, right?
The county decides the amount. I don't know if the statute is as prescriptive as how it's determined. I think the statute reads that they have to make the determination of
So if they determine the amount, how do we put that into our budget without an amount? Or they just approve what we request or make changes from our request?
All right, the way the statute reads is that the tax levying authority for a school administrative unit may, under the procedures of another statute, fix the compensation expense allowances paid members of the Board of Education, funds, per diem. Okay, now another statute.
Well, we can have Michelle look into that too at the same time we look into all this. And we don't need.
We'll look into that, Mrs. Helms, and find out.
I just was curious why we wouldn't start it in the fiscal year instead of November.
It's an excellent question. So we'll have Michelle look into that and figure out if it's July 1 or November and get back to the board.
Is there a number that you'd like for us to look at to cost out?
I think a reasonable amount be 400 for board members and say 600 for the chair. That's not out of line with some of our municipalities, well below county compensation, and considering we have responsibilities for over 40,000 students or 5,000 employees and budget of over $400 million, I don't think that's unreasonable.
And just looking at this, even if we went to 406 and 600, it should be noted that we still would be among the lowest paid in the state. And we can decide if we want to phase in, over, like every 2 years, do a step, but, decide what, we want as a board.
Well, I'll throw that out there, 600 for the chair, 400 for the board, have the staff come back with what numbers, how that would impact the budget.
What did you say, 6 and 4?
6 and 4. I guess that would also be affected if we have to wait until December, or we could do it July 1st. So you'd be looking at 3 quarters basically.
Maybe December. Okay. I see calculators. So I think we're still working.
That's only in reduced salaries, so.
It would be about 25,000
25,000.
to take the chair up to 6 and the other members up to 4. Over a 12-month period, it'll be about 25,000.
Okay.
That includes the benefits as well as the salary.
What benefits?
We get
Look at
a
all
life
this at once.
insurance. No, we get a life insurance, a $10,000 life insurance.
But not health care or anything else that I think that you would relate to benefits. Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Unless there's any more comments. Anyone, Matt, Christina, Joe?
No, I've asked my question on it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, then I think were we on slide 20? Okay.
This is just the dollar amounts that go along with the budget.
Okay. 21 is
21 question.
Much like the question on the position for the social and emotional person who's in charge, I have the same question on the beginning teacher support coordinators. Will they be at central office or in a school office?
I would expect that they would be out in schools 90 to 95% of their day working to mentor and support beginning teachers. I don't see much office time at all.
But I guess it's the same question as the lead counselor. Are they in the schools or are they at a central office?
Yeah, their main goal will be out in the schools working with the beginning teachers. They will do some coordinating of activities for the whole group, but their main job will be out in the field with the teachers.
But their office will be at central office.
Space permitting. They may be out in a school somewhere simply because there's not really much space at the central office.
so it would be fair to say that all of these positions would be school-based.
That's
Yes.
what we should try to do. Yep.
Even though number 1 is the only one that says school-based. So we'll just make them
We'll
all
make the changes
school-based.
to school-based.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions from 21?
Nope.
Okay. 22 is self-explanatory. Then that brings us to the capital budget on slide 24. And I believe everyone should have a copy of our 5-year CIP and our 1-year 2019.
Just so the full board knows, tomorrow morning at the Strategic Planning Technology Transportation Committee meeting, the technology and the transportation aspects of this budget will go to that committee for review and for feedback. We have not had a chance to meet with them until tomorrow.
With respect to the CIP, it shows 14,847,490 versus about 13.8 million in fiscal 18. So it's an increase for up. Overall, capital is up almost $3 million. But the 2019 CIP touches 36 of our 53 schools, and we've changed the true-up a little bit. The true-up will go to Indian Trail Elementary School. In the category, it should say true-up under there. Fairview, a small amount. Windows for East and Parkwood, security, and Waxhaw Elementary chiller. And that total is 3.335 million versus the 3.145 that they've told us, because we heard that that wasn't a final number. So we're hoping that by putting more stuff to it, it'll win. And if not, Mr. Covington's looking at me like, where are you getting them?
I only looked at you because the number came from Mr. Yates and it's out of their CAFR.
It's an estimate, though, is my understanding.
Now, according to Mr. Yates, that's the true up funding that is listed in their annual
Not
financial
according to the
CAFA.
county commissioner, so I don't know where I think we have to have a whole conversation about true up because
I would like to see the math on that as well. Maybe we need to give them a heads up that they, maybe their staff could give a presentation, could do a small presentation on that funding and how, and the reason and rhyme behind that.
Are you requesting that for Thursday?
Yes. I would like to ask if the county, as part of the discussion, perhaps the county manager could direct their staff to provide a mini or a diagram or a discussion of how the true-up funding is derived and the estimation for this year. And if that's changed since we were given that 3.1 number.
yeah, I wasn't calling into question Mr. Covington's 3.145. I'm just saying what I've heard from the county commissioner was it was just an estimate in that point in time.
So do we want to have staff reach out to the county to ask for this information to be shared Thursday night?
I think it would be helpful to see how that information is derived.
I have a meeting with the county manager tomorrow. I'll be
Okay.
glad to make that request.
Or let me know if I need to make a request, but we'll start with you. Okay, so that's facilities. Were there any questions from the CIP? Any feedback, any questions? I know that the facilities committee has vetted and vetted and vetted these items. So speaking for myself, I feel very good about the CIP.
Could you tell me again what the total was for the CIP?
Why is it different than what's on your thing?
14,847, 490.
14,847,490, which is the same thing on 24.
Could I ask about the various roofing maintenance, repair and replacement projects budgeted at $2 million? I assume this is results of the roof audit that's been completed and these projects have been identified?
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Correct. Kathy, do you have anything to add on the roofing projects?
The $2 million listed as for various roofing projects is the result of the audit,
Correct.
and projects have been identified.
Correct. And if you look at the 5-year plan, you'll see more money in the 5th year out. There's about $9 million for roofing if you go to the 5th year because of stuff that's recommended in the audit.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions on the CIP, you know, the capital budget also includes transportation and technology services. Any feedback from the board?
We haven't seen those yet, right? We haven't seen technology anyways, or transportation.
And the SPIT committee is meeting
Tomorrow morning.
tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning, 7:30.
I know, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we'll, you know, have more information after that, and you're welcome to, you know, watch it live or come be with us at 7:30 in the morning. You're always welcome to come join us. Okay, if there aren't any other questions on slide 24, that brings us to our summary. Any feedback on how the summary is being presented? Starting with 26, slide 26. Well, I guess that ends it. Any feedback on this format, this layout? Is this how we want to end the presentation on Thursday? We good with this? Okay. Okay, are there any more questions or comments?
So
I'll just add that we will be happy to try to, by end of this week, all these categories that you've looked at, to try to get to the board, because I do think that either the finance committee would need to meet again prior to Tuesday to get more feedback or look at our budget. We want to go into Tuesday night very well prepared to present a budget based on the administration and the board's recommendation. So as soon as Mr. Covington and Mr. Barnes primarily can help us with those numbers, we'll work with the finance committee to try to find an appropriate time to meet.
So it seems like Monday would be better than Tuesday, right? So we need to talk to Joe and to Leslie and get it, if we can do it on Monday morning preferably, right?
Yeah, I heard it. I just have to check my calendar.
Okay.
Because we're going to have to pull the trigger Thursday.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a general question I have. Do we have in our policy that we don't count the weekend towards that 48 hours? Or is that just tradition?
The law says 48 hours. And there's not, to my knowledge, a North Carolina case which says is that 48 business hours or 48 calendar hours. And the courts in other jurisdictions are mixed. And so to play it safe, we try and work for 48 business. Now we have, in emergency circumstances, done 48 hours. But to give people real legitimate notice, people don't necessarily look at our website over the weekends and those kinds of things. So it's most appropriate. And Ms. Stalbert and I like the 48 business hours.
I like that too. I agree. So, is that it?
Okay, if there are not any more questions or comments regarding the budget, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second, but is staff kind of clear on some of the options that we want to look at? Everybody feel comfortable with that?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you want us to look at as far as the band? Are we talking uniforms, equipment? What are we costing?
Dr. Jones is going to have that covered. He's looking at all of the above.
Yeah, I think we're okay with phase-in plans too. Like if we look at covering transportation for the band, we cover transportation for high school sports. What if we cover transportation for the band as well? Or what if we covered uniforms, which just big things. We can phase it in. Same with ROTC, junior ROTC,
and just from experience, I think we need to be real clear. Not only are we talking about regular season transportation, but I think we're looking at, playoffs and championships. If the team is going to be there, we want the band to be there as well, regardless,
Well, okay, so we're talking about potentially offsetting some of the costs for these groups, or a flat appropriation that they use, because
we give a flat appropriation to the high schools for transportation for sports. So
Yeah.
if you added to that and included the band and the ROTC and
because that'd be a lot
Whatever
easier for
else is
staff to
missing from
calculate than trying to figure out what every band
I agree.
incurs as far as a cost for transportation or what have you.
That would be my assumption of how we would do that. And on uniforms, I think the best thing to look at is a replacement schedule for all of our schools and how you would do that per school per year. How many you could afford to do that for on a rotating basis.
All the sports in high school are provided, right? Do we provide union uniforms to all the?
I thought it was is it from the Booster Club? No, sports, all sports. Do the booster clubs pay for the sports or the?
Not all of them. Like the ticket sales goes with to the athletic club for the campus. Those are used to buy uniforms also. Not only the booster club buys uniforms.
Cabarrus County.
But what? No.
So I'm just.
Ticket sales stay with the school. Concession stands go to
They're
Booster
used for
Club.
uniforms and stuff, the ticket sales. Some of them are paid for by the school.
That I know. I pay for all my $350. Just gonna be paying.
For uniforms?
It's for the whole thing, the uniform.
Or include.
So my question is, how is it done at the high school? Everybody's talking at me. Nobody's answering. They're like, no. Tell me exactly how it's paid for at high school.
Sports sponsored by the
Yes.
school
I know that. but I'm-
are paid for through the athletic clubs,
The Booster Club? No?
athletic funds,
Okay.
normally gate sales.
So what sports at the high school are paid for by the school?
It's basketball.
Only club
Well-
sports will be paid for by the school. If they're part of our district offering for sports,
Yes,
we cover those.
that's what I thought. So it's most every, I think, my understanding is the only club sport in high school is lacrosse, right? I think it's lacrosse. And that's a whole nother discussion. Okay.
The high school I
I'm
was at.
sorry, I thought that any reusable uniform, like football, baseball, part of cheerleading, any reusable uniform was paid out of gate sales as well as refs.
Yes.
I thought, like, obviously the kick pants for the cheerleaders, swimming. I know golf. I buy the shirts. Tennis. I know Piedmont's tennis team one year bought T-shirts because they didn't even have shirts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was under the impression the gate was for reusable uniforms and for the rest.
That's correct.
At Cabarrus County, when I taught over there, football and basketball funded all of the sports programs. Baseball, track, tennis, because they bring in no money. Girls softball.
Right. Okay. Just to say it one more time, at the high school level, things are covered by at the district level, school level, whatever. They do not come out of booster funds. They come out of school funds to pay for uniforms and things like that at the high school level. If you're in band, you have to raise the money for your uniforms and for your transportation to and from football games and to and from competitions. So the football team rides a bus provided by you. We give them a thing of money to every high school that says this covers your transportation, and that's what it's used for. But the band, ROTC, all that is not part of that thing. They have to raise their own money. The ROTC has to raise their own money. Okay.
And to be honest, in a year when your football team's not doing good, the band performance at halftime is the best part of the game.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, I believe I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, board.